My own son told me I was a depreciating asset and needed to sign over my life's work or get out of the house I built with my own two hands. I'm Frank Miller, 62 years old. For 40 years, I've been a master carpenter, building custom furniture that's in the homes of senators and CEOs. I can tell you the species of a tree by the smell of its sawdust. I've worked with wood so rare it costs more than gold. I held my wife Helen's hand as she took her last breath 15 years ago. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for those words coming from Kevin, my 32-year-old son, standing in the middle of my own workshop, the one I built on this land before he was even born. He had his arm around his girlfriend, Tiffany, who was nodding like some kind of bobblehead oracle. He looked me dead in the eye, not a flicker of shame. "Dad, it's about brand synergy. The Frank Miller Woodworks name has legacy value, but you're not monetizing it correctly. We need to transition the assets before your declining productivity impacts the valuation." Any other father would have taken a belt sander to his backside. But I just felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. It was like finding the perfect straight grain in a rough-cut piece of lumber. I actually cracked a small smile. "That's a hell of a perspective, son." He and his little guru had no earthly idea what they had just unleashed. "You will not believe what I did next. Let me show you the blueprint of how we got to this disaster." Kevin graduated from UNC Chapel Hill with a degree in communications 10 years ago. Cost me $110,000, every last dime scraped together from furniture commissions and Helen's modest life insurance policy. He never wanted to work with his hands. Said it was beneath his brand. I remember when he was 16, I tried to teach him how to use a lathe. He was clumsy, impatient. After he gouged a piece of expensive walnut, he threw the tool down and said, "Why would anyone do this when you can just buy something from a factory?" That should have been my first clue. Instead of a trade, he became well, I'm still not sure what he does. A lifestyle consultant, or something. He makes about $60,000 a year helping people optimize their personal narratives on Instagram. That was after his first 3 business ventures failed. There was the curated sock subscription box, the artisanal dog biscuit delivery service, and the mobile app for rating coffee shop aesthetics. Each one started with a grand vision and ended with me writing a check to cover his debts. The last one cost me nearly $25,000. Each time he'd promise this was the one, and each time I'd bail him out. But here's the kicker. For 10 years, since he graduated, Kevin has lived in the guest house on my property. A 1,200 square foot house that I designed and built for my own parents. He's lived there completely, 100%, free. No rent. No utilities. Not a single dime for property taxes or insurance. I even kept him on my cell phone plan and paid for the insurance on his Audi A4. A $48,000 car he bought to project a successful image. When Helen died, I made a vow. Kevin would have the foundation we never did. I wanted him to fly, to chase whatever dream he had, without the weight of financial struggle holding him down. I think, in hindsight, I didn't give him a foundation, I gave him a featherbed. He never learned how to stand on his own because he never had to. So when he started dating Tiffany a year ago, I tried to be supportive. She's a mindset coach and an influencer. All buzzwords and no substance. Seemed ambitious, I guess. That was my first huge miscalculation. I first met her when she came over for dinner. She spent the entire time on her phone, taking pictures of my food and posting them with hashtags like #AuthenticLiving and #craftsmanchic. She never once asked me about my work, just about the property's acreage. Tiffany started filling Kevin's head with poison dressed up as business advice. Generational wealth transfer, leveraging legacy assets, optimizing your inheritance. It all sounded so sophisticated, but it boiled down to one ugly thing. Kevin should see me not as his father, but as a roadblock to his financial future. The shift was subtle at first. Kevin started making suggestions about the workshop. "Dad, you should really get a CNC machine. The artisanal craftsman angle is a dying market." Or, "This whole workshop could be converted into a great content studio. We could rent it out." A few weeks later, I found him and Tiffany walking the property with an iPad, taking pictures and making notes. When I asked what they were doing, Tiffany smiled sweetly and said, "Just auditing the assets for the transition, Frank. It's best to have a full inventory." They were treating my home like a corporate property they were about to acquire. Then came the meeting 3 weeks ago. Kevin and Tiffany invited me to dinner at the main house. I cooked a standing rib roast, Helen's favorite for special occasions. We're sitting there, and Tiffany starts talking about proactive estate planning. "Frank," she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin like she was in a boardroom, "Kevin and I have been mapping out his 5-year financial plan. Your current asset allocation is inefficient." I put my fork down. "My what?" Kevin jumped in, all puffed up and serious. "Dad, Tiffany's right. I'm an adult. A professional. I need to start treating the family legacy like a business. You're basically just occupying prime real estate while the brand equity stagnates." The brand equity. Let me tell you about Kevin's contribution to the family legacy. It was zero. Nada. Zilch. I still paid the $9,200 in annual property taxes for the entire 5-acre lot. I paid the utility bills, averaging $600 a month for both houses. I paid for the new roof on his guest house last year after that big hailstorm. $14,000. But because Tiffany had convinced him this was all his future inheritance, I was the one who was stagnating. Tiffany nodded, her face a mask of fake empathy. "It's about creating a smooth transition, Frank. Kevin's generation understands that you can't let emotional attachments devalue a portfolio." This kid, all of 28 years old, was talking to me about portfolios. Me, a man who's been running a profitable, debt-free business since before she was born. "So what are you proposing, exactly?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Kevin straightened up, like he'd been rehearsing. "We've had a business valuation expert do a preliminary assessment. The business, property, and your designs are worth about $1.2 million. We've formed a new LLC, Miller Legacy Ventures, and we need you to sign over all assets to the new company." "And what do I get out of this?" "You get to live here, of course," Tiffany chirped. "Think of it as us doing you a favor. We'll manage the business, modernize the brand, and you can potter around in the workshop as a consultant." "But if I don't sign it over?" I asked. Kevin's face hardened. "That was the moment I lost my son. Then you'll have to start contributing to the operational overhead. We've calculated your share of the property expenses. Market rate for the main house is about $3,500 a month. That seems fair. Pay you rent to live in the house I built on the land I own." "It's not your house anymore, Dad," he said, his voice cold as steel. "It's an asset. And it's time you started acting like it." That night, I sat in my favorite leather chair, the first one I ever built for Helen, and I did some real thinking. The kind of deep, quiet thinking you do when you realize the person you raised sees a balance sheet where a heart should be. Kevin wanted to play CEO. He wanted to treat our family like a corporate takeover. Fine. Game on. The next morning, I drove into Charlotte to see my old friend, Marty Goldberg. Marty's a lawyer, sharp as a tack and twice as mean in a courtroom. We sat in his office, overlooking the city. I laid out the whole ugly story. He listened without interrupting, his face getting grimmer by the second. When I was done, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Frank," he said, "I've seen some greedy, entitled kids in my day, but this takes the cake. They're not just asking for an inheritance, they're staging a hostile takeover of your life." "So what do I do, Marty?" "Well," he said, leaning forward, "we could fight them. Drag it out in court. It would be messy and expensive. Or, we could do something elegant. Something they'll never see coming." That's when he told me about the concept of a charitable trust. "You create a foundation," he explained. "You donate everything to it. You remain in control as the chairman for life. The foundation's mission would be to support the craft you love. After you're gone, the assets are protected forever, and your legacy isn't about money, it's about art. It's a fortress, Frank. Legally unassailable." A fortress. I liked the sound of that. "How fast can we do it?" I asked. Marty grinned. "Frank, nothing you do is hypothetical. Let's talk business. The real bombshell was set for Thanksgiving. Kevin had insisted on hosting in my house with my food to begin the transition of family leadership. He invited the whole clan, my brother Robert and his wife, my sister Claire and her family, even my cousins from Raleigh. It was a full house, the perfect audience for what I knew would be his corporate-style coup. As we were finishing dessert, Kevin stood up, tapping a wine glass with a fork. He had a smug, self-satisfied look on his face that made my blood run cold. "Everyone," he began, "as you know, Dad's been working hard his whole life. It's time for him to enjoy his golden years. So, Tiffany and I have been working on a plan to professionalize the Frank Miller brand and ensure his legacy continues for generations to come." My sister Claire looked confused. "What kind of plan, Kevin? Your father's business is his life." "Exactly," Kevin said, beaming. "And that's why we've created Miller Legacy Ventures. We're taking over the day-to-day operations so Dad can finally retire. He'll be signing over the assets to our new company this week. My house, my workshop, my business name, my designs, everything." Chad, my nephew who's about Kevin's age, piped up. "So, you're just taking Uncle Frank's company?" Tiffany jumped in, her voice dripping with condescension. "We're not taking it, Chad. We're stewarding it. Frank's generation doesn't always understand modern brand management. Emotional attachment can be a huge liability." My brother Robert, a no-nonsense contractor, narrowed his eyes. "Are you saying Frank is incompetent to run his own business?" "What we're saying," Kevin said, his voice turning firm, "is that this is a family matter that has been decided. Dad needs to accept that his role is changing. We can't let the business depreciate just because he's sentimental." "Depreciate." He called me a depreciating asset in front of our entire family. I sat there, calmly finishing my slice of pumpkin pie that I baked from a pumpkin I grew in my garden. I listened as my son explained to our family how I was essentially a liability to my own success. "Tiffany has been a huge help in structuring this," Kevin went on. "Did you know that by transferring the assets now, we avoid significant estate taxes later? Dad's never even thought about that. He's been operating on outdated principles." Claire stared at them, horrified. "So you're forcing your father out of his own home and business?" "We're not forcing him," Kevin said coldly. "We're giving him a choice. He can either sign the transfer documents and live here under our management, or he can start paying market rate rent for the property. $3,500 a month. It's a very generous offer." That's when I finally pushed my chair back and stood up. "That is a fascinating proposal, son." I used the same calm tone from that day in the workshop. This time, however, I pulled a thick leather-bound folder from my briefcase by the door. "Since we're having a public discussion about the family legacy," I said, walking to the head of the table, "perhaps everyone should see the actual legal and financial structure of that legacy." Kevin's smile faltered. "Dad, what is that?" "Paperwork," I said, opening the folder. 8 years' worth, to be precise. Every receipt for every dollar I've given you since you graduated from college." I looked directly at my brother. "Robert, want to guess how much Kevin has contributed to the maintenance of his free guest house in the last 10 years? Kevin started to protest. "Dad, this isn't necessary." "Zero," I continued, my voice clear and steady. "Not 1 cent. The new roof last year? $14,000. The septic tank pump out 2 years ago? $800. The Audi A4 he drives? I paid the down payment as a graduation gift. $10,000. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the hardwood floors I installed myself. Claire looked at Kevin with a look of pure disappointment. "Kevin, are you actually trying to charge your father rent?" Kevin squared his shoulders, trying to regain control. "I'm establishing financial boundaries. Dad's generation needs to understand that family isn't a blank check." "A blank check," I repeated slowly. "Well then, Kevin, let's talk about checks." I pulled out another set of documents from the folder. This is a legally registered, fully incorporated, non-profit charitable trust. It's called the Helen Miller Memorial Foundation for Aspiring Artisans. Kevin's face went white. You did what? Last week, I transferred ownership of every single asset you just mentioned. This house, the 5 acres of land, the workshop, the tools, the business name Frank Miller Woodworks, and the intellectual property rights to all my furniture designs, into this foundation. Tiffany stood up so fast she knocked her water glass over. You can't do that. That's our inheritance. It was never your inheritance, I corrected her. It was my life's work. And now, its purpose is to provide scholarships and grants to young, talented woodworkers who need a start. People who actually respect the craft. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. I am the lifetime, unpaid chairman of the board. I have the legal right to live on this property and operate my business here until the day I die. After that, the entire estate is managed by the foundation's board of trustees. I then pulled out the final document. It was a formal, legally binding eviction notice. And since you, Kevin, have declared yourself the new manager of this property, and have been living in the foundation's guest house without a lease agreement, the board, which is me, has voted to terminate your tenancy. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Kevin stared at the eviction notice like it was written in another language. Tiffany was hyperventilating, furiously typing on her phone, probably searching for a legal loophole that didn't exist. Dad, Kevin whispered, his voice cracking. You gave away our house. I secured my legacy, I corrected him. A legacy of generosity and craftsmanship, not greed and corporate buzzwords. My brother Robert let out a low whistle. Frank, that's brilliant. He then looked at Kevin. You brought this on yourself, kid. You got greedy and you got stupid. Kevin's voice got shrill. This is about Tiffany, isn't it? You're punishing me because you don't like my girlfriend. Son, I said, my voice softening just a little. This has nothing to do with Tiffany. She was just the catalyst. This is about you. I spent my life giving you a foundation, and you looked at that foundation and saw nothing but a dollar amount you could extract. You saw me not as a father, but as an obstacle. I pointed to the eviction notice on the table. You wanted to learn about business, Kevin. Well, here's your first lesson. This is called a consequence. What happened over the next 30 days was an education for my son in the harshest sense of the word. The family, once he'd tried to rally them to his side, completely turned on him. Aunt Claire told him not to bother calling her for a place to stay. When he called my brother Robert asking for a loan, Robert told him, the bank of Dad is closed. Welcome to the real world. Tiffany, the brilliant mindset coach, saw the writing on the wall. Once she confirmed with her own lawyer that the charitable trust was ironclad and there was no inheritance to be had, she vanished. Blocked Kevin's number, deleted their pictures from Instagram, and was gone within a week. The Miller legacy was no longer part of her 5-year plan. I heard later she'd shacked up with some crypto bro. Kevin was completely alone. He had to sell his fancy clothes and watch collection just to scrape together enough cash for a security deposit. He tried to sell the Audi, but since I'd only made the down payment, he was so upside down on the loan that he ended up having to let the bank repossess it. Watching that tow truck haul away his precious image was a sight to see. He had to pack up 10 years of his life from the guest house. He watched as I went about my business in the workshop, the rhythmic sound of my hand plane shaving maple, a sound that used to be the soundtrack of his childhood, now a constant reminder of what he'd thrown away. The day he was supposed to move out, a beat-up U-Haul pulled into the driveway. Kevin looked exhausted and defeated. As he loaded the last box, he stopped and looked at the main house, the one I built. All those years, he said quietly, mostly to himself. All those years you paid for everything. I never even thought to say thank you. No, you didn't, I replied, not unkindly. You thought it was what you were owed. He finally looked at me, real shame in his eyes for the first time. Why did you do it, Dad? Why give it all away? I set down my tools and wiped my hands on a rag. I didn't give it away, Kevin. I invested it. I invested it in a legacy that would actually do some good in the world, instead of funding a lifestyle you didn't earn. I pointed toward the guest house he was leaving. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to live on your own terms. Well, today's the first day of that life. I sincerely hope you make something of it." He just nodded, got in the U-Haul, and drove away. I didn't feel happy. I felt quiet. The property was finally mine again, free from the poison of entitlement. But my son was gone. The next 6 months were the quietest of my life. I threw myself into my work. I finalized the Foundation's charter with Marty, and we selected the first 2 scholarship recipients, a young woman from Appalachia with a real gift for carving and a veteran from Fayetteville looking to learn a new trade. It felt good. It felt right. Kevin fell completely off the map. My brother heard through a friend that he was working some miserable data entry job, living in a tiny, bleak apartment across town. Part of me, the father part, ached. I wanted to call him, to make sure he was eating, to help him. But the part of me he had betrayed knew this was something he had to do on his own. He had to build his own foundation, from scratch, with his own 2 hands. He had to learn the value of $1 by earning it, not by inheriting it. Then, one Saturday morning in early summer, I was out in my workshop sanding a cherrywood dining table when I saw a figure walking up my long driveway. It was Kevin. He was thinner, his clothes were worn, and his hands were calloused. He didn't say a word at first, just stood in the doorway of the workshop, breathing in the familiar scent of sawdust and varnish. "That's a beautiful piece," he said, nodding toward the table. "Book-matched cherry?" I was stunned. He'd never cared about the wood before. "It is," I said. He walked over and ran his rough hand gently over the surface. "I get it now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The time. The patience. What this takes. What it means." He told me he'd been working a second job on weekends, helping a framing crew. The labor was brutal, but for the first time in his life, he ended the day having made something real. He pulled a crumpled envelope out of his pocket and set it on the table. "It's not much. It's $100. I'm going to bring you one every month. It'll take me about 300 years to pay you back for everything, but it's a start." I looked at the money, then back at my son. I saw a man, not the entitled boy who had left 6 months ago. "I don't want your money, Kevin," I said. His face fell. "I know. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I don't want your money," I repeated, walking over to a dusty workbench in the corner. "I want your time." I picked up an old worn apron and held it out to him. "The foundation needs volunteers. And I need a shop apprentice. The pay is terrible. The hours are long. You'll sweep floors for the first 6 months. You'll learn how to sharpen a chisel until you can shave with it. You'll learn the difference between red oak and white oak just by the feel of it. But you'll learn a trade. You'll learn to build something real with your own 2 hands." Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at the apron. He slowly reached out and took it from me, the rough canvas foreign in his hands. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered, the words finally coming out, raw and real. "I am so sorry for what I tried to do. For what I became." I put my hand on his shoulder. It felt solid. Grounded. "I know you are," I said. "Now put the apron on. We've got a lot of sawdust to make." Our relationship isn't what it was. It's better. It's not built on obligation or expectation anymore. It's being rebuilt slowly, one board at a time, on a foundation of honesty and hard-earned respect. He still lives in his little apartment across town, and he's still paying off his debts. But every weekend he's here, in the workshop. Last week, I let him make his first dovetail joint. It was crooked and gapped, but he didn't throw the tool down. He looked at it, studied it, and started over. And that's a legacy worth more than any amount of money.